Melanie Griffith rocketed to the top of Hollywood with a career-defining performance in Working Girl, showcasing her rich voice, gorgeous eyes, and a combination of sensuality and innocence. She became a modern female icon of the 1980s, won a Golden Globe, and was nominated for an Oscar. Few are aware of the startling decision that lay beneath that spotlight. Melanie left school at the age of 15 and moved home with her mother's co-star and her lover, who was 8 years older. All of Hollywood was gossiping about their romance. It signaled the start of a downward trend. She became addicted to alcohol at a young age due to temptations and upheaval, which ultimately led to her entering a recovery facility. Her career took a hit. One divorce after another ensued. 3 distinct men and 3 children. Her name was invoked by the media for scandals, failures, and wounds that were too obvious to conceal more than for victories. Melanie Griffith, once America's ideal girl, was rejected by Hollywood, derided with Razzie Awards, and dismissed as a relic of a bygone heyday. How did a girl who had been lost since she was a teenager manage to endure everything and continue to walk as though she had never fallen? You won't be able to turn away from this narrative. Born in New York on August 9, 1957, Melanie Griffith came from a household where celebrity came before birth. In Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds and Marnie, her mother, Tippi Hedren, was a famous movie star from the 1960s who personified the cool, enigmatic stereotype. In addition to being well-known, Tippi was regarded as a feminist and fashion icon of her era. Peter Griffith, her father, worked as an advertising executive after acting as a youngster. When she was just 4 years old, her parents were divorced. Melanie grew raised in a complex home after moving to Los Angeles with her mother. 3 half-siblings from her mother's side, as well as Noel Marshall, her stepfather. Melanie has 2 more half-siblings as a result of her biological father's second marriage. Her family's foundation was unstable and devoid of emotional anchors due to the frequent changes in relationships, family members, and lifestyles. Although she was surrounded by grown-ups growing up, she had relatively few true mentors. She had a unique childhood. In order to prepare for the years-long film Roar, which included more than 100 wild creatures, her mother's family maintained wild animals at home. Elephants, tigers, black panthers, and lions were all around Melanie as a child. They roamed the home like dogs, something she was accustomed to. However, that did not imply that they were innocuous. She suffered a serious injury when a lion attacked her face during one filming. Melanie required several stitches and reconstructive surgery. She suffered from trauma. It wasn't only a coincidence. For a girl who was still in her teens, it meant actual harm, both psychologically and physically. She practically started performing at a young age. She had her first appearance on camera when she was 9 months old, in a commercial. Silent background roles followed. No one taught her how to deal with the tumultuous environment she was thrust into at a young age. Few people at the time ventured to challenge Alfred Hitchcock's domineering manner, but her mother, Tippi Hedren, was a strong lady who famously did so. She was brave, self-reliant, and proud, yet she frequently put her personal and professional goals before of her family. She was a shadow too big to rely on, yet she was also an idol to Melanie. The majority of Tippi's time was spent in creative circles and on set for films like Roar. Melanie looked up to her mother, but she didn't have any solid moral or emotional direction. She gained knowledge from both seeing and experiencing life firsthand. Melanie accompanied her mother to the Herod experiment set when she was 14 years old. There, she started dating people who weren't suitable for her age, which caused her to leave school at the age of 15. Everything changed after that. She lived in a world where celebrity took precedence over emotions, backstage, at parties, and in complicated relationships. Melanie's career continued to stir up controversy after Night Moves. She kept making frequent movie appearances in both leading and supporting parts. She had a significant chance to collaborate with well-known actors in 1975 when she played the daughter of Paul Newman's main character in The Drowning Pool. She continued her early career of playing bad girls in 1977 when she starred in Joyride, a crime-action movie that explored the idea of a young girl on the run. Melanie also appeared in more experimental films, such as One on One, a sports school drama in which she played a small part, and Smile, 1975, a parody on beauty pageants. Even if these performances didn't make her famous, they demonstrated that she was putting a lot of effort into each endeavor in an effort to establish her worth. These roles demonstrated that despite the fact that no breakthrough had yet been made, Melanie had worked steadily on a variety of projects and wasn't merely riding the wave of controversy. Melanie Griffith didn't completely disappear from Hollywood for over 10 years following Night Moves, but she also didn't make a big impression. She consistently starred in action movies, TV series, and dramas. She had been handpicked for experimental projects and had collaborated with Paul Newman. However, none of the parts were compelling enough for viewers to recall her name. Filmmakers saw an alluring form and a seductive face, but they were shallow. She was still viewed by fans as that tiny nymphette from years ago. She was not yet a well-known actress. In the murky light of celebrity, Melanie herself roamed, seen but unidentified. Then everything changed with the release of Body Double in 1984. Following the success of Scarface, Brian De Palma directed the movie. De Palma was regarded as Hitchcock's contemporary successor, favored lengthy voyeuristic shots that portrayed powerlessness, chilly environments, and gloomy eroticism. Body Double was no exception. Combining vertigo and back window, it created a spooky universe where crime, images, and desire all coexisted. Melanie was chosen to play the role of Holly Body, a porn star who is being seen via a telescope. Even before it was released, the part caused controversy due to Melanie's near-complete nudity and its controversial premise. However, she decided to be herself this time, in contrast to the roles she had previously been forced into. "I was well aware of what I was doing. I made this decision." Later, she stated, "I wasn't coerced." She was no longer the image-driven girl. She was an actor who took charge of her persona, using sexuality as a weapon rather than a trap. The movie had to be cut down for a RAR classification after coming dangerously close to receiving an X from the MPAA. Conservative organizations demonstrated. It was called anti-feminist by the media. De Palma said, "I'm exposing an industry that exploits women, not taking advantage of them." Melanie stood at the center of the tempest with an oddly composed resolve in the midst of everything. Not only did Holly Body's involvement spark public discussion, but also caught critics off guard. Melanie received the National Society of Film Critics Best Supporting Actress Award. She received recognition for her performance rather than her looks for the first time. Major directors also started to take her seriously for the first time. She was later cast in Something Wild by Jonathan Demme, who claimed to have noticed a frantic yet determined fire in her eyes. After this movie, Mike Nichols started thinking about her for Working Girl. Despite not being a box office success, Body Double became a cult favorite over time. The voyeuristic shots through the telescope, the moment when Melanie dances to unwind, and the picture of Holly Body became famous. While much of Hollywood was still hesitating after Body Double, Jonathan Demme called. "No chemistry exams or auditions, just I want Melanie Griffith," he remarked. She wasn't picked by Demme because of her appearance. Melanie is a piece between two worlds, which is ideal for a character who lives beyond the lines like Lulu, he once said. And maybe only a filmmaker like Demme, who is perceptive, unorthodox, and constantly sees what others miss, could see the intriguing turmoil inside Melanie at that very time. Lulu was a difficult part to play because she was a woman with two distinct personalities. On the outside, she was rebellious, impetuous, and bold, but on the inside she was scared, hurt, and running. Viewers witnessed Lulu dragging a bashful office worker on an odd adventure, but underneath all of her strange behavior was the shadow of a young woman who had never learned to love herself. Melanie didn't have to behave in a conventional manner because of this. She introduced an aspect of her own self, an instability she had experienced since childhood, to the screen. A desire to escape the constrained, seductive girl stereotype. Melanie requested retakes in some private sequences if she didn't feel secure. The girl who had been forced to stand in front of cameras at the age of 14 was no longer willing to put up with anything in order to be seen. She was heard and established limits for the first time. She maintained control over her image both on screen and off. There was an intriguing friction between her and co-star Jeff Daniels, who wasn't the studio's first pick either. Like a blank mirror, Daniels reflected Lulu's disarray and accentuated Melanie's brilliance. It was a significant step, but Something Wild wasn't a smash. Critics described it as fascinating, strange and surprising. For the first time as a real performer, Melanie was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Actress, no longer associated with controversy. This part, which was gained with creative faith rather than sensuous appeal, was a turning point more significant than the nomination. She was selected for this time, not because of her curves, but because of her profundity. From that point on, well-known filmmakers started to recall Melanie Griffith. Mike Nichols was one of them. He was working on a movie called Working Girl, which would not only transform Melanie's career, it would alter Hollywood's treatment of her. Melanie Griffith joined the ranks of in-demand actors after Something Crazy, but her big break didn't come until Working Girl, 1988. She became Tess McGill, a secretary from a humble upbringing, who was bright and extremely driven, under Mike Nichols' guidance. The job was in line with the growing feminist movement, and Melanie's portrayal of the role was marked by her characteristic fragility, compassion, and resolve. Working Girl garnered her a Golden Globe for Best Actress, an Academy Award nomination, 6 Oscar nominations, and a global box office total of nearly $100 million. For the first time, Melanie was acknowledged as a serious actress, with skill rather than simply a lovely face with a controversial history. But that attention was short-lived. She soon starred alongside Michael Keaton and Matthew Modine in the psychological thriller Pacific Heights, 1990. John Schlesinger's storyline and directing were excellent, but the movie only had mediocre success and did nothing to keep her momentum going. She worked with filmmaker Brian De Palma again that year on the much-awaited adaptation of a best-selling book, Bonfire of the Vanities. However, the movie was a box office disaster and received a lot of negative reviews, especially for Melanie's portrayal of a high society mistress, which many people thought was uninteresting and unconvincing. After that, she starred in a string of lackluster movies, including Shining Through 1992, a wartime spy movie that reviewers called implausible and unreal because Melanie lacked the gravity to carry the plot. She was compared to a lifeless copy of Judy Holliday in the drab 1993 remake, Born Yesterday. In the 1994 family comedy Milk Money, she portrayed a sex worker. Critics referred to it as a step backward, and audiences failed to relate. Although she had a terrific performance in the 1996 retro noir Mulholland Falls, the male ensemble overwhelmed her in a character that was perceived as superficial. She received several nominations for Worst Actress at the Razzie Awards, often for 2 films at once, as a result of her blunders. However, there were some positive aspects throughout the setbacks. 1994's Nobody's Fool. She co-starred with Paul Newman in a popular social drama in a supporting role. Her subtlety and restraint were lauded in her performance. Buffalo Girls 1995. She was nominated for a Golden Globe for her surprise portrayal of a genuine cowgirl in a TV miniseries based on a Western classic, an HBO movie on the creation of Citizen Kane, RKO 281, 1999. Her portrayal of Marion Davies earned her nods for both the Emmy and the Golden Globes, reaffirming her acting prowess. She played the lead in Antonio Banderas's passion project Crazy in Alabama, which was also released in 1999. Melanie portrayed a Southern woman who had her husband's severed head in the trunk as she fled her violent marriage. Both reviewers and viewers rejected it in spite of its original idea and strong financial commitment. After a succession of mediocre jobs, many believed she was making too much of an effort to establish herself. Melanie Griffith's standing in Hollywood had changed by the late 1990s. Once, she had climbed to the top and down just as quickly, but her perseverance remained the same. Even when nobody was expecting anything anymore, she continued to perform and show up. Antonio and Melanie Banderas made a significant risk that same year. They collaborated on Crazy in Alabama, a genuine family endeavor. He directed, she starred. It was meant to serve as a springboard for a common creative identity in addition to being an independent art film, a fresh approach that deviates from Hollywood convention. Melanie portrayed a Southern woman who had her husband's head in the trunk of her car while fleeing a brutal marriage. The picture, which was full of creative and thematic ambition, blended black humor with drama. However, the lofty expectations soon fell apart. Audiences mostly disregarded the picture, which critics characterized as overcrowded and uninteresting. Not only was the failure commercial, but it also severely damaged both of their professional reputations. Melanie viewed it as an excessive effort to restore her lost status. It served as a warning to Banderas as a budding filmmaker. An ambitious but difficult period, both creatively and professionally, came to an end with a project that was supposed to be a return. Don Johnson was the subject of 2 marriages and an unbreakable love. On the filming of The Herod Experiment in 1972, Melanie Griffith got to know Don Johnson. She accompanied her mother, actress Tippi Hedren, when she was just 14 years old. Hedren co-starred in the movie with Don, who was 8 years her senior. Griffith claims that she had never been attracted to a man before. When her teenage daughter showed interest in an adult guy, her mother remembered feeling alarmed. "I couldn't explain the strong bond between them," Hedren remarked. Melanie moved in with Don Johnson a year later. They were engaged on her 18th birthday. They took a plane to Las Vegas the following day, where they were married. But that first marriage didn't last long. 6 months, years later, Johnson acknowledged that he had spent the most of the pre-wedding night with Marjorie Wallace, the former Miss World. Information that led the public to perceive their connection as being way too hurried and brittle. They fell silent after the split. However, the link never truly vanished. Their 2 boys from other marriages served as ring-bearers for their 1989 remarriage, which took place in a private ceremony at a ranch in Aspen, over 13 years later. Both were already well known by this point. Melanie had just won a Golden Globe for Working Girl, and Don Johnson was flying high with Miami Vice. However, there was a more nuanced reality underneath the glitzy exterior. Both had battled alcoholism, and it was said that Don Johnson continued to have relationships and live a party-loving lifestyle. He had been connected to some of the most talked-about women in Hollywood at the time, including Penelope Ann Miller, Uma Thurman, and Barbra Streisand. But Melanie had faith in him. "I believe that some relationships are meant to be, and this could be one of them," she said. Dakota Johnson, their daughter, was born 3 months after the wedding. However, the second marriage soon began to exhibit indications of pressure, much like the first. Melanie claimed irreconcilable differences when she filed for divorce once more in 1994. "We developed in various ways," she acknowledged. According to some accounts, one of the most profound reasons for the breakup was Johnson's continuous infidelity and unstable personal life. They maintained their regard even after the split. In 2019, Johnson told the Daily Telegraph, beginning at a very young age, Melanie Griffith and Don Johnson's relationship went through stages of passion, uncertainty, reconciliation, and letting go. Even if it wasn't a fairy tale romance anymore, it served as evidence of how complex true love can be, a place where people walk away, look back, and yet owe one another decency in the end. Melanie Griffith first saw actor Stephen Bauer on the set of She's in the Army, now 1981, in the early 1980s, when she was trying to make a name for herself after a string of unmemorable supporting parts and a tumultuous personal life. In contrast to her prior complex relationships, Bauer was at the same age and enjoying success as a result of his portrayal of Manny in Scarface, 1983, a pivotal movie of the decade. Melanie obviously wanted security, so she married Bauer in 1981. Alexander Bauer, their son, was born in 1985. Melanie focused on her art and experienced a rare moment of quiet in her romantic life during this time. In a calculated move, supported by Stephen Bauer himself, she started taking acting classes seriously in New York under the renowned Stella Adler. Melanie was able to escape the shadow of parts that just focused on her appearance by going back to school and improving her skills. She was soon cast in Body Double, 1984 by director Brian De Palma, which led to a string of groundbreaking roles and 2 Golden Globe nominations in a row. Peace, however, did not last long. The marriage gradually began to fall apart as Melanie started to take back the limelight on film. While Stephen Bauer was changing, she got right to work. Just when she was getting back together with Don Johnson and getting ready for a second, more troubled marriage, they formally divorced in 1989. Although he may not have been Melanie Griffith's most well-known lover, Stephen Bauer was the only one who assisted her in escaping toxic relationships and helped her start over. In hindsight, that could have been the most subtly mature period of her life, within a life that hardly stopped. At the 1989 Academy Awards, Antonio Banderas fell in love with Melanie Griffith. She was an Oscar-nominated actress who went there with her husband, Don Johnson, and he was a rising Spanish celebrity at the time. Banderas remembered, "I had to ask Pedro Almodovar who this woman in a cream dress wearing pearls was." He inquired about her age during their first chat, which Melanie subsequently called the rudest thing she had ever heard. Nevertheless, it had a profound effect on both of them. They were still married 6 years later when they co-starred in Too Much in 1995, yet their connection was evident. Banderas said, "We tried to be respectful, but it just wasn't possible." Within a year they separated from their relationships and were married in a low-key wedding in London. They welcomed Stella, their daughter, in September 1996. The Griffith-Banderas family swiftly rose to prominence in Hollywood as a symbol of grace and solidarity, consistently showing up together at functions and projecting a sense of unwavering support. However, things did not go as planned. The media started focusing on Melanie's jealousy when Banderas was filming Evita with Madonna, who had already publicly acknowledged her love for him. Before she was finally barred from the set, she was often on set and pregnant at the time. In a subsequent interview, Melanie acknowledged that she was upset by it. "All I wanted was to be close to my husband, but all of a sudden, I was portrayed as a worried wife." The event turned into a big tabloid story. Later, Madonna denied any misconduct. She remarked, "I wish I had Antonio, but Melanie never lost sight of him." Cracks had begun to emerge, but they had weathered the scandal. Melanie Griffith filed for divorce in 2014, after they had been together for almost 20 years. She claimed that since she was divorced and no longer under stress, she no longer experienced seizures. Antonio's reaction was not one of resentment. Conversely, he kept talking positively about his ex-wife. "Until the day I die, I shall always adore her." In friendship and affection, they parted ways. There was no anger shown despite Melanie receiving their Aspen house and $65,000 a month. They stayed friends, continued to show up together for their daughter Stella, and continued to address one another with thanks and respect. In Melanie Griffith's turbulent life, that could have been one of the most exquisite events. A lady who had it all, lost it everything, and still managed to hold on to what was most important: compassion for one another, following a passionate love. The cost Melanie Griffith had to pay for her early rise to fame was equally as swift and irresistible as the stardom itself, both literally and figuratively. The Hollywood press started paying more attention to her personal life than her performances by the late 1980s. Alcohol, narcotics, and constant media pressure were harder than romance scandals. Melanie was not evasive. She acknowledged that at the age of 10, she drank her first drink. The Oscar-nominated actress then veered unpredictably between addiction and rehabilitation for the following 20 years. Undergoing treatment in 1988, going back in 2000, and then again in 2009. She collapsed behind closed doors and walked the red carpet. She kept recovery journals, which she later shared online, and she treasured golden awards. A confession in public. It would get her sympathy, she believed. It didn't. In an interview with Moore in 2002, Melanie inadvertently provoked a flurry of criticism. She disclosed that she had allowed Alexander, her 16-year-old son, to use marijuana. "Why? I reasoned that it would be better to smoke it at home than to purchase something that may kill him on the street." The remark crossed moral lines and was used as tabloid headline material. The outcome: when Alexander joined a 12-step program, Griffith was publicly given the moniker she had always feared for the first time. "Mother is a bad person," she added. "I was wrong, and I vowed to never let my other children to experience it. However, it didn't stop there. Rumors that Griffith had checked her daughter Dakota into a treatment facility when she was a teenager soon started to circulate in headlines. Griffith refuted it. She did not, however, refute this. Because she was unable to handle the emotional strain of the family, Dakota had sought treatment. The anguish wasn't in the yelling battles when both parents were addicts, splitting up, then getting back together, and then splitting up again. It happened during dinnertime stillness. Melanie stated that she needed room to breathe, and I accepted that. A heart with the name Antonio, a small golden pear on her hip, Don Johnson's nickname for her, and a tiny marijuana leaf on her ankle are the 3 tattoos that are etched on her body like scars from various periods of her life. The smallest of these is perhaps the most eerie, not because it's beautiful, but because it serves as a reminder of the one thing she couldn't control herself. There was no resentment despite the dissolution of 4 marriages. Melanie maintained a cordial relationship with each of her 3 former spouses. Their compassion for children born of broken love stories brought them together when they appeared together at Dakota's graduation and posed for pictures hand in hand. She lives as honestly as she can, according to a close friend. And maybe that's what makes Melanie Griffith unique in the end. A woman who made a lot of blunders but never concealed them. Rather, she stayed with them and allowed her kids to visit. In order for them to know what they should and shouldn't do when they grow up, Melanie Griffith has 3 children from her 4 marriages. Alexander Bauer, Stephen Bauer's eldest son, had to enter a 12-step recovery program after his mother acknowledged letting him sample marijuana when he was 16 because she thought it was better to smoke at home than to acquire it on the street. Her youngest child, Stella Banderas and Antonio Banderas, have opted to live a tranquil life away from the entertainment business and the media. Dakota Johnson, however, is the most observed and profoundly impacted kid in Griffith's complex personal life. Dakota was raised in the limelight and among upheaval as the daughter of a famous family. Her parents went through 2 divorces. They were never left alone by the media. In between travel, many moves, and movie shooting, therapy sessions were planned. She was homeschooled without a set schedule 1 year and studied at a hotel in Budapest the next. I didn't learn in the manner that children are expected to. In one interview, Dakota revealed that her parents' celebrity became a hardship. During their high school years, students would bring tabloid pieces about Don Johnson and Griffith to class, read them out loud, and distribute them. The anguish persisted even though Dakota never replied. She started treatment early because she felt she couldn't breathe in a tense home, not because she had a specific ailment. Melanie acknowledged that her daughter needed space, but she refuted reports that Dakota had been moved to a recovery facility. She responded, "I respected that. Little roles were the first step toward refusing to rely on her family's Dakota. Juilliard rejected her, and she only made brief appearances on social media. However, she persevered until she became famous due to her leading part in 50 Shades of Grey." From a young woman growing up in the spotlight, Dakota became a representation of a new generation that is self-reliant, in charge of her own image, and not letting her parents' history define her. Melanie once claimed that although I didn't offer her the perfect upbringing, I was always honest with her. Dakota inherited and developed the capacity to endure chaos with an unusual composure in a household where faults were publicly shown. Skin cancer presented Melanie Griffith with yet another significant obstacle following years of personal and professional upheaval. She was given a diagnosis of basal cell carcinoma, or BCC, in 2009. If treatment is not received, this common but potentially aggressive kind of skin cancer might spread. Her face had the tumor, which needed to be surgically removed. Many people assumed that the bruised and swollen eye in the post-surgery images was the consequence of an accident. Actually, though, it was the aftermath of a cancer surgery. It was a devastating setback for an actress whose career depended on her face. Griffith subsequently acknowledged that it's scary to be an actor whose job depends on your appearance, but it didn't stop there. The malignancy reappeared in 2017. This time she had dermabrasion, a process that removes malignant cells from the nose and resurfaces it. On social media, she posted pictures of her face without makeup and bandaged, not for publicity, but to spread awareness of the need of using sunscreen, getting regular skin exams, and paying attention to any changes in your body. Additionally, In early 2025, massive wildfires drove hundreds of inhabitants to escape from their homes in Los Angeles, forcing Melanie and Stella to briefly leave. Nevertheless, she remained optimistic, keeping the public informed on a regular basis and fostering community support. Griffith revealed a special and uncommon occasion in January 2025, as she celebrated her mother, movie icon Tippi Hedren, turning 95. In a brief Instagram video, Hedren can be seen waving to viewers, blowing out candles, and grinning with happiness. "My darling mom just turned 95, Melanie wrote as the caption. She is vibrant, content, and in good health. A tender yet potent tribute to the tenacity of 3 generations of women living together and enduring numerous hardships. Melanie Griffith is 67 years old, and yet leads an active and fulfilling life, a path that shines through awareness, connection, and the calm delight of just being oneself, rather than one that is focused on the spotlight." She made her on-screen comeback in 2025 as the narrator of By Design, a Sundance Film Festival debut of a film directed by Amanda Kramer. Melanie's distinctive husky tone and abiding artistic energy left a lasting effect, despite her voice-only appearance. Positive reviews for the movie confirmed that her artistic appeal had never really diminished. Griffith continues to be her family's emotional pillar in her private life. She happily announced in August 2024 that her youngest daughter, Stella Banderas, had been engaged to Alex Grozinski, a friend from her youth. Melanie publicly shared the heartwarming moment between the young pair on social media, calling it a lovely start to a relationship that has lasted since kindergarten. Melanie Griffith continues to be actively involved in important community service, in addition to her family and art. "I have fought against basal cell cancer twice, in 2009 and 2017. She actively takes part in activities to increase awareness of skin cancer, such as Cycle for Survival, which collects money for research into uncommon cancers. Her experience, which includes recovering from surgery after a tumor was removed from her nose and dreading scars, serves as much than simply a health warning regarding sun exposure. It's a daring statement from a lady who has experienced alterations to her face, which was formerly thought to be her greatest strength in the acting industry." Today's Melanie Griffith is not the sex icon she was in the past. She no longer lives via roles or high-profile unions. She is an unconditionally loving mother, a lady who has fallen and gotten back up several times, and a person who now lives slowly, completely, and cherishes every minute, like the final rays of a sunset that are yet precious. Melanie Griffith is a vivid representation of a life completely lived, with all its faults, blunders, and triumphs, even if she was never a perfect icon. From a teenage girl who fell in love with the wrong man, to a mother who decided to put her celebrity aside to become a parent, she demonstrates that sometimes the bravest thing to do is to live authentically, even if it means being messy. Did Melanie Griffith compose a script that no one else dared to perform, or is she a victim of Hollywood? Leave a comment with your ideas. Your viewpoint would be much appreciated. Additionally, remember to press the notification bell, like and subscribe, because the upcoming videos will tell you stories that are much more complex, realistic, and full of surprising twists. Although the illness wasn't fatal, it needed something extra: the forbearance and bravery to continue presenting a less-than-ideal front to the world. "But it was fine," she stated in an interview with InStyle. It was a humorous line, but it concealed years of therapy, dread, and silent worry about her profession, looks, and other people's opinions. Thankfully, the cancer was discovered early. The 5-year survival rate for BCC is over 100% if it hasn't spread, according to doctors. But for Melanie, raising public awareness was a greater triumph. She emphasized the need of skin protection, routine examinations, and treating every symptom with seriousness by sharing her personal experience. Her friends and family were her compass through it all. Griffith frequently expresses gratitude for her children's affection, and for all 3 of her ex-husbands, who supported, encouraged, and held her hand throughout her most trying times. She previously remarked, "I love all 3 of my ex-husbands, and we're very close." Not a joke, but a sincere network of support that kept her going. The world no longer saw a blonde movie star walking the red carpet. Instead, it saw a woman who was willing to face her cancer cell by cell and go on living, stronger and kinder than ever. Melanie Griffith's fight with the disease may not have been the most significant chapter in her life, but it was the quietest, most resilient, and possibly the most meaningful. It was never Melanie Griffith who was the ideal Hollywood stereotype. She wasn't the type of lady that was adored or praised for her poise like the traditional idols. However, one thing cannot be denied. Through defiance, vulnerability, and a tremendous will to maintain her identity, when everything around her attempted to change it into something more acceptable, she crossed limits that few actors ventured to. Melanie was the type of celebrity who allowed people to see the flaws in the icy, well-polished temples of fame. She was attractive not because she was perfect, but rather because she was genuine, courageous, sensitive, and feisty. Because of this, despite the sharp declines in her career, she has never been fully forgotten. Her ability to act may be disputed. Melanie is still important in that argument, even if she was nominated for 7 Razzies and won 3 times. Nobody quarrels over a forgettable person. She formerly had the title of Miss Golden Globe, which is given to offspring of Hollywood celebrities, and she subsequently gave it to her daughter, Dakota Johnson. Having both of them get the accolade made them the only mother-daughter pair in history. That tale is more than simply a collection of honors. It is a real example of how a heritage can endure across generations without concealing its imperfections. The same has been said of Melanie by Dakota and her grandmother, movie icon Tippi Hedren. A lady who, although being lost, maintains her individuality. That could be the most significant legacy Melanie leaves. A striking example of someone who faltered but didn't vanish, who made errors but didn't give up, and who demonstrated that it's possible to start over regardless of how far away fame or youth may have slid. Melanie has always maintained an aspect of herself that is unaffected by attention or celebrity outside of her professional job. She supports programs for children with burn injuries and helps generate money for her mother's Shambhala Preserve, a shelter for stray wild animals. After all the scandals and storms, these efforts, which are neither headline-grabbing nor attempts at image repair, are sufficient to change how people perceive her. Although Melanie Griffith won't leave a conventional legacy, she represents a generation of women who have the courage to grow up, live truthfully, and fail in public. She is evidence in Hollywood that while celebrity might wane, character endures. Furthermore, a scar might occasionally convey a greater message than a flawless face ever could.